name is Ayushman Kalita. I am a student of BA in Political Science, second year. It was very interesting, sir. I observed two things and then I developed two questions. So first is that if the Mahabharat war happened in around 3000 BC, so why was it recorded 2000 years later? And the second one is what is your conclusion on Ashoka? So did he really exist or was he
Interesting. First thing was about why was Mahabharata recorded 2000 years later? Well, I didn't say Mahabharata as such was recorded, right? I said Mahabharata epic was composed in around 1000 BC as per its own internal evidence. Does it mean that Mahabharata was not referred to before in Indian literature? No, I didn't say that. It was in fact, right? In fact, the Vedic literature itself, though I admit that it does not have a direct reference to Mahabharat war, but it has a reference to Dhritarashtra Vaichitra Virya, it has a reference to Krishnaya Devaki Putraya, and then it has references like many other things, which are circumstantially known to be of contemporary to or a little later or even before Mahabharata. Okay, so Mahabharata period as such, in fact, what we are claiming is, as we have already shown, we have a lot of literature, but that is all oral. By its inherent nature, it is all oral. And as I already said, because of the later invention of Lipi, it is very difficult for us to even expect that we would be having any scribed material. And unless we are scribing, this folk literature cannot be carried to a, because something, if it has to be carried verbatim, then only it will retain its originality. If it is continuously revised by the locals, then what will happen? It will only reflect the last revision, right? That is what is precisely Mahabharata epic in 1000 BC. Okay, this is the first way. Okay. About the second one, will you please repeat?
So what was your conclusion on Ashoka, sir?
Okay.
And was he related to Priyadarshi?
Okay. Now this is a very, in fact, this is a necessary, see, I agree fully that any theory has to first, all the known evidences, it has to sort. Then only it can claim to stand. And then only it will be considered. So one has to also tackle this issue of who was this king. Now there are two ways to look at this, because most of the lekhas, they talk of Devanam Priya Priyadarshi, and only some two minor rock edicts later on, discovered later on, very interestingly, and they only talk of, at one place it talks of Ashoka, and at the other place it says Ashoka Raja. And why is it a big issue? Because it also discusses 4 neighboring kings. Okay, that is how it has. Modern historians think that it is not even the sheet anchor of Sandracotta and Chandragupta Maurya. Even they are ready to relinquish that. They say this is the most important thing. This has to be the Ashok Maurya because of the Mahavamsha in Siloni's accounts, and then it has to be Ashoka Maurya of this description, and the dates they have already fixed up. What is the play? The dates they have already brought to 3rd century BCE. Now is it all that sacred? Once, there are two ways this could have been. If the scripts were already existing, let's say we are able to prove that we are, as I am showing here, that actually we need to make further studies into this development of scripts. Like our respected Vedveer ji is already doing this. That we have to know the scripts, the Greek scripts, called Yavanani. Yavanani in our Indian literature. It has been mentioned by Vartikas. Yavanal Lipyam, there is a sutram. Lipi is mentioned by Panini. Yavanal Lipyam is a sutram which basically is the derivation of the word called Yavanani, which means Lipi of Yavanas. Now we have dated him to around, say, 14th century or 15th century BC. But then it has to be supported by these physical evidences have also to be taken there. So now what happens is these rock edicts and pillars, they are not inherently datable by radiocarbon method. So some other thing has to be there. Some, where from it has been found, what was the surroundings and something like this. Some, and whatever, or probably further discoveries can throw more light on this. And if we are able to show that scripts were actually there in 15th century, then it would be very easy to overcome this hurdle by simply claiming that, okay, if it might have been the Ashoka as such of the Maurya dynasty, still these 4 kings are not necessarily the four contemporary kings of in the terms of 3rd century BC. They would be his contemporary kings, because Yavanas have been, as has been already known through literature, that Yavanas, Shakas, they were already there for a long time as Indian neighbors. Okay, so those Magas, because it talks of a Yavana and a Maga, and it also talks of these southern kingdoms. So one can say, as it has been already done by Kota Venkatachalam, and then that it would be having some 4 contemporary names to Ashoka Maurya. Okay, that is one explanation. But supposing it happens that the scripts were not actually there in 15th century BC, supposing, then I had one interesting suggestion to make for such a, what we would say, contingency. In such a contingency, if you look at this, let us notice this Vishwasphurji, Vishwasphani. Notice this Vishwasphurji, Vishwasphani as the king mentioned in that same period of 3rd century BC. Do you notice? He is in the same period of that 106 years from this Kilkia Greeks with this Chandramsha, Zandrams of Vidisha, and then we have this Vishwasphurji in Magadhas, and he is being described as a very cruel king. He won over a vast territory, but and he started new Varanas, but he was like a Kliva. He was good looking, but he was a coward. Now all this description, I have not considered anything out of this. All this is there in Puranas, in multiple accounts. Of course, the name is not Ashoka, but then probably because it is Devanam Priyadarshi, and Ashoka might have been a title which is sparingly used, or maybe there is some more explanation. So it is some Priyadarshi king by name which is being referred to here, and because disparagingly, this account is actually a disparaging account. Probably because he is a Buddha follower, and these Puranas are from they are like the Pauranics. So basically they are the Sanatanis, and they are trying to disparage him, and hence some name, they have missed the original name probably, and this is how I would explain. So I have 2 explanations to offer, and I admit that this is a hurdle, and it's a major hurdle, and one needs to tackle it.
Sir, one more observation I would like to share with you regarding Ashoka. Sir, since the last 3-4 years, when the non-secular discourse has taken shape, ever since the election of Modi, so one thing has been often doing the rounds that Ashoka has been imposed by the so-called eminent historians on us. So what do you have to say about that?
Yes, it is very.
Because of his non-violence.
Yeah, no. See, let us first specifically differentiate between Ashoka Maurya. If Ashoka Maurya is an indescript person in our list, so the first statement to make is a indescript. He is not like Nanda. Nanda is given great weight by our lists. Ashoka is not actually been discussed by these, at least Puranic lists. Of course, Buddha literature and Jain literature, they might be discussing him. I am not a student of that. I have a very limited scope actually. That is that happens in this multidisciplinary approach. And if he was something like this, then well, he might be have that. He might have that. Why we should grudge him? So I am not interested in grudging anybody any place in history, but rather, as I discussed, I am not interested in rhetorics. See, not at least in present time. I might enter into a barrage, but then presently we are more interested in evidences and seeing whether we can fit them nicely up without cutting the pieces. Jigsaw puzzle has to fall in place by itself. We cannot cut the pieces. We have to simply reject our hypothesis and go ahead.
Yes, we'll take a. You have a question? Yes.
I'm just curious. I've tried to follow this. I'm going to watch the video again. I'm just wondering, from your calculations, what are the birth dates of Lord Ram, Krishna, and Buddha?
Balaram, Krishna and
No, Lord Ram.
Acha, Lord Rama. Well, as I just said, I work with evidences, right? So if I had no evidence to share with you, there is no need to. I will not speculate. So I do not simply have any information about birth of Rama, at least not in this literature. Second is Krishna. Again, it would be very obvious because as I just mentioned those passages in Chandogya, where Krishnaya Devaki Putraya Tadhaitat Ghora Angirasa Uktvo Vacha. Tadhaitat Ghora Angirasa Krishnaya Devaki Putraya Uktvo Vacha. Now there is quite a similarity between this and that Angirasa Sandipani being the teacher of Krishna Devaki Putra and so on. Okay, so one naturally would lead to, as we already shown, right? We had that 3109 would be the Yudhishthira epoch. Again, I do not know. I have no further information as to when exactly it means in that so-called Mahabharata history. I am not talking about Mahabharata epic as such, because as we have already discussed, epic is all the way down. So I can't rely much upon it. Okay, it is useful, but I will not stake my, I will not put my neck into the scaffold for that. And here I am ready to, because this theory has to be discarded if anything of this is wrong. Okay, so third is about Gautam Buddha. Now you can see this, both Buddha I have already mentioned, he was a contemporary of Shishunaga dynasty. In fact, there are details of this, all these dynasties, all the way up to at least Andhras, it is all very clear, all those names of the kings, and one can very well make out that this Shakyaputra was in the end of that, there is a parallel dynasty of this called Ikshvaku's dynasty. There is a Kuru dynasty, Ikshvaku dynasty, and this is a Magadha dynasty. And in this Ikshvaku dynasty, we see this Buddha. And it is being known by other literature as contemporary to some king in this Shishunaga period. Ajatashatru, in fact. Bimbisara and Ajatashatru. And then we can make out that this date of Buddha would be something like 1630, 1650, something like that. Okay.